But I'd like to welcome you all to another, in fact, as I said earlier, it's a year, 1 year. Let's call this one our anniversary. This is our anniversary
Oh,
with Kate Bradbury, who's actually been on before because Kate and I spoke, well, actually, it wasn't that far off a year about gardens, didn't we?
we did. We did. Yeah. Yeah. Quite early into the lockdown, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the memories are flooding back now. I'm sure some of you may have been here then. Um, must say, by the way, that tonight is sponsored by Leica Sport Optics, so thank you very much. So, Kate and I, by the way, we go back a little way. We met in the Black Country. Was it Birmingham? Was
I think it was Bird Fair where we met originally.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. But the most poignant time for me, the time that stuck in my memory more than because the thing is, in Bird Fair, you see so many different people,
Yeah.
and I could meet my mum there and forgot I saw her. But I met you at a book signing. Um,
Hosted by Birmingham and what Black Country Wildlife Trust, I
that's
think.
that's that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew I
At
had the
this
Black Country bit.
this lovely little sort of garden room near the near the cricket ground, near Edgbaston Cricket Ground. It was round there, Cannon Hill Park, round there that
Okay,
way.
well, I didn't remember it that intimately. I just remember being in a garden centre with you, and we were sat together. We were talking about our respective books, and I remember connecting with you, thinking you're a cool woman, and you know your stuff as well, which was really nice. So we had a good time, and we've sort of kept in touch ever since. But for those who do not know Kate, and you will know her obviously more after this hour, Kate, can you just break down who are you and what are you to us?
Oh gosh. I'm Kate Bradbury. I am a garden writer, specialising in wildlife gardening, which is my huge passion. What am I to you? Uh, that one on Twitter who goes on about frogs all the time, I think. Yeah, I write lots of books. Well, I've written 4 books, so I'm here to talk about my latest one, which is how to create a wildlife pond. Um, I don't know what I am to you. I don't know.
Okay,
You tell me.
let me break it down a bit more then, because maybe that was a bit abstract. I was actually thinking of a song, which
Okay.
was some of you might know it. One or two of you might know this song. It's by actually I can't remember who it's by, but but the actual the title was "Who Are You and What Are You to Me."
Hmm.
So I thought it was because it was basically this guy was singing about another guy that was trying to take his wife or girlfriend or
Oh.
something. But
Oh.
anyway, I didn't mean it in that respect. So let's start
Okay.
again. Let's start again. So how did you get into to adoring nature and particularly frogs and gardening as well? Actually,
Well, I've always been a gardener. I've been a gardener since I was about 3. I was all sort of mucking around in the mud when I was a kid. My grandparents were very strong gardeners. My parents were very sort of passionate gardeners. So it sort of rubbed off really. Um, Sort of started growing my own veg at the age of 11. I was the person at university that everyone brought their dead house plants to. It was just, I've just always been a gardener. It's always been in me. And then started writing about gardening when I was about 25, which was very not cool at the time, um, compared to all my friends doing things like becoming music journalists. That was me writing about vegetables. And the wildlife thing came around that time. Because my girlfriend at the time, her housemate threw an old duvet into the backyard and the bumblebee made a nest in it, and the neighbours complained, and then the landlord got involved and said, oh, I've got to get rid of this bumblebee nest. And I was like, oh, we've got to save the bumblebees. And that's just how it started straight away. I found out everything about the bumblebee life cycle. I found out how to move a bumblebee nest. I took the bumblebees to my allotment in my car. I didn't do any work on the allotment for the rest of the year because I was just so in love with these bumblebees, just staring at the bumblebees. So yeah, wildlife gardening sort of came from that really. And suddenly I realised sort of quite early on that the more you can tweak your habitat, you can change the way you garden to make it more fun for you, but better for sort of declining species. So you can do the gardening for the bumblebees, you can dig a pond for the amphibians and all the other animals that use ponds. You can plant certain trees, you can plant them in certain positions, you can just do lots of really cool things that work really well to bring the wildlife in. And I just read all of the books and banged on about it so much. By this point I was working for Gardeners World magazine, so they made me their wildlife editor because I was just going on about it all the time and just absorbing everything, and yeah, it's just sort of taken off from there really. I sort of live and breathe wildlife gardening. I'm constantly doing little experiments to see if I can bring more things in, and I love it. It's the best thing ever.
That's fantastic. I mean, one of the things I love about you was your controversial, in fact, I actually agree with it totally, but your controversial comments on insect hotels, bug hotels.
My controversial comments. What about about bug boxes? The bug hotel. Well, there's the difference between bee hotels, which are very useful if managed, and then bug hotels, which are sort of marketed by. They just tend to be marketed, I think, and made by companies that don't necessarily know what they're creating the habitats for. And what you tend to get is bamboo canes, which are used by bees, in the same box as bits of pine cone. Sometimes you get bits of straw. I've seen bits of straw in these boxes. So you're creating habitats for bees and their predators in the same space. So I think that's what you're referring to. Yeah, I think some of these artificial habitats are absolutely brilliant, but the ones that are absolutely brilliant are the ones that have been well researched and designed by people who know what they're doing, and the others sadly don't.
Yeah, the whole idea of wildlife gardening is obviously taken off in a major way, and I think maybe since last year with the incidents of the first part of this pandemic kicking off, made people actually think about it more. But for me, I mean, I don't know. Do you find that? I know we'll get onto ponds in a sec, but do you find that with gardening? I mean, for me, do you find people that either are into it or not? For me, it's always felt like hard work, and maybe it's because of my childhood. I mean, I was forced to go out and water the garden when I didn't want to do it, and it was used as a punishment. But in reality, it made me watch nature more, actually. But I just hated the act of watering, and I hated the act of pulling up weeds and stuff like that. So are people like that generally, or do you think most of us are born green fingered?
I don't think most people are born green fingered. I certainly think some people just have it in them and some people don't. So I was saying earlier how my grandparents and parents' passion for gardening rubbed off on me. Completely missed out on my sister. She's got no clue at all. It's actually embarrassing. The texts, the questions she sends me by text. What's wrong with my plant? It's dead. It's like, it's autumn, love. Come on. Yeah. So I think there's a natural sort of propensity to either be a gardener or not be a gardener. But then at the same time, I think you can learn it. I think you can learn to appreciate it. Certainly, I mean, I'm 40 now, and I've been doing this since all through my life. And the whole time I was doing it, as a teenager, I was sneaking off to do gardening because I didn't want anyone to know that I was doing it. When I was in my 20s, it was still, people just thought I was really weird. In my 30s, people finally started asking questions of, oh, I've got this balcony and, I thought I might pot up some plants. And then, now we're in our 40s, a lot of my friends are sort of starting to appreciate the garden space, and they want to do nice things and they want to garden for wildlife. So I think it's something that you can grow into. I think it's something that you can learn to love. I think certainly in the last year with lockdown, people have just appreciated the outside space more, and in appreciating it and spending more time in it, wanting to do more with the space. So I guess it's a mixed bag, really. I think, if you're someone like me, then you have to be outside all the time. You have to be doing it all the time, and if you don't do it, you're really miserable. But then there's sort of other levels of loving that, and I think it's all great, really.
You originally hail from the Midlands, but where are you now?
Brighton. Very dry Brighton, which is great. It's very dry, it's very sunny. I'm sort of very near the coast. Technically in Portslade, which is next to Hove, if anyone knows that area. And yes, so it's quite industrial. There's a big port, there's a big high street 2 blocks away. So I get a lot of wildlife in. I don't get huge amounts because it's just not the habitat. But I've got hedgehogs and I've got frogs and birds. I've got a willow warbler coming in at the moment every day that's just obviously on his way to nicer habitats inland in Sussex, but it's just hanging out in the garden at the moment. And you taught me that song, David, so I know it's a willow warbler, I'm not a chiff-chaff. And it's good. I've got a 40-foot garden. It's not that big at all. It's just, you know, a very standard Victorian terrace house with a garden at the back and a little alleyway that, you know, is an old coal route, which is where all the wildlife sort of comes in, connects to the local park, and it's nice.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, one more gardening question before we get onto the ponds. I mean, I'm quite fascinated. I mean, obviously, with wildlife gardening, I know a lot of stuff in theory. I mean, I've written a book myself which has an element about gardening for wildlife, which, you know, it's like you kind of know it at the time whilst you're writing it and you kind of investigate it, but then once you've written it, it's like a lot of it's gone. Is it in the UK, for example, are gardens more or less the same in terms of you can grow anything anywhere, or is it in certain places you think, you know, you can't grow certain things? I mean, I suppose further north you might not be able to grow certain things, or is that a myth?
Yeah, no, you can certainly get away with more in the south than you can in the north. I mean, if you look at Frogspawn, the Frogspawn Map, I don't know if you're aware of the Frogspawn Map, it's great. And the Frogspawn Map is a sort of interactive map where you have little blobs on the map of the British Isles, and it starts becoming interactive in December because the frogs start spawning in Cornwall and Devon in December, and they start spawning in northeast Scotland in April. So you've got like a 4-month window of the sort of journey of the frogs for the conditions to be right for them to spawn. And I think that's quite a nice analogy really for the rest of the country. The southwest is the warmest and the wettest, and you know the northeast is cold and drier. So yes, in terms of gardening, you can grow things. You can grow more things in the south, and you can grow things for longer in the south as well. So you can plant your potatoes sooner. You can plant your dahlias sooner. You can still be harvesting things sort of later in the year. And your flowering window as well. So when you're gardening for bees, for example, so because of climate change, some bees are emerging earlier from hibernation, and then on the other end of the spectrum, they're sort of going into hibernation later. So as wildlife gardeners, we encourage people to extend that season of pollen and nectar by growing as many flowering plants in February as you possibly can, and then right the way through to November. But that's sort of, I haven't tried it in Scotland, but it's less possible in Scotland to do that because of the narrower summer window, I suppose.
Yeah. When you were here last, obviously we were talking about gardens, but ponds came up repeatedly, which I'm so happy we can talk about ponds now. And I think at the time I told you that I dug a pond myself at the tender age of around about 8 or 9.
Yes.
But with no permission from my parents, and I forgot the golden rule, which was to line it.
Oh.
So all that effort, and it became a marsh.
Oh.
So I haven't got, unfortunately, your book with me. I don't think anyone in the world has it, no?
No, people who've bought it have got it, but yes, people who've requested review copies don't have it at the moment, apparently. But they're on their way. I have been assured they've been posted out.
Okay. Well, what's the fascination with ponds, and can anyone have a pond? Let me ask you that first basic question.
Anyone can have a pond. I've actually dug out some pictures of my pond, so I can share my screen if you like, and I can show some people my garden pond if anyone's interested.
That's what we're here for, to see
Is that
all
what you're
about
here
ponds.
For? All about ponds. Right, let me share my screen. How do I do this?
Okay, well, you go to the share screen button at the bottom. So
Share screen. Hi. Right.
yes.
One.
So whilst you're doing that, is there
There we
okay,
go.
all
Can you
right,
see that?
yeah. By the way,
Okay.
the Zoomers, if you want to see this properly, then switch from gallery view to the full view, the speaker view bit, and you'll see the whole picture.
Is that a better? Can I go full screen on this? Can everybody see the full pond, or is it better if I do that?
No, the first, yeah, that's it. Yeah,
That's
good.
it. Yeah. Okay. So this is my garden pond in its full glory in summer. It doesn't look like that now at the moment. And yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely beautiful. I love it. It's a natural pond, so it's lined with butyl pond liner, but then on top of that, there's fleece, and then on top of that is a layer of subsoil, which we've planted directly into. So you get this lovely natural look. It's a bit cloudy there because it's still quite young, but there's very clear water now. It's got 2 little stone beaches. It's got some little loggy things. If I move my mouse over here, you can see that, I think. So it's got logs coming in. This hedgehogs love walking down this. It's really cute. So all the birds bathe in this bit here by the beach and this bit here by the beach, and this is where the frogs spawn as well, because it warms up earlier in spring, because it gets the sun at the first thing in the morning. And then this is my dragonfly perch, which is amazing. And most of the year it's used by sparrows and once a pigeon who broke it. But in July, specifically July and August, dragonflies also use it, which is wonderful. And around it, I've planted wildflowers. I've got a little wildflower meadow going on here. And yeah, it brings all the wildlife to my garden. It's fantastic. I get red mason bees taking the mud from the pond in spring. I get loads of birds bathing in it. I get amphibians. I get so many insects. I'm trying to identify them all, but it's just an amazing world sort of living beneath the surface of the water, and it's brilliant. So in answer to David's question, can anyone have a pond? I think the answer is yes. You can have a pond like this if you've got a garden. If you don't, you can have a container pond. I've got in my front garden, I've just got a little, I call it my front garden pond, which is very glamorous. Sounds more glamorous than it is. It's just a little butler sink, planted up with some marginals. And it's also sort of doubles up as a little fox bowl or a dog bowl. But I get dragonflies using it and different flies using it, and a couple of beetles as well. So that's really lovely. You can have ponds that sit proud of the soil. You can have big built-up ponds that you can sit around. You can have ponds dug into the ground. All sorts of ponds. So yes, anyone can have a pond, David.
Okay. Now let's ask some basic questions. I'm going to be very basic tonight.
Okay.
Where do you get the water from? Because you often hear people. I've heard people say, "I went down to the river, and I, filled up with water from the river." Where should you be getting your water from?
Well, in an ideal world, we'd use rainwater because rainwater is lower in nutrients than tap water, and obviously it's nature's way. But when you're digging a pond from scratch, unless you're digging it in autumn ahead of huge autumn rains, then actually it's okay to fill it with tap water and let the water settle before putting the plants in. In some parts of Britain, there are more different water companies have different levels of sort of chemical residues in their water. So in some parts of the country, and I'm afraid I don't know which ones, you need to leave water before adding it to your pond if you've got anything living in it, because there's chlorine and other sort of other chemical bits and residues in there that need to sort of evaporate off before they're safe for wildlife to use. But that's actually not the case where I live, thankfully, because sometimes I have to top up my pond in summer with tap water. So yes, ideally rainwater, but you can use tap water. And I think the sort of getting a jam jar of water from an existing pond, while that is, I can imagine that's very beneficial in some ways. I think these days I would be less inclined to do that, because yes, you can bring in some little microscopic water bearers and things like that, and you know, maybe the odd beetle or two that can then populate your pond, and you know, sort of all the sort of stuff that sort of settles everything in. You can also bring in blanket weed without realizing. You can bring potentially little bits of invasive pom plants, and I'm not quite sure, but I mean, at the moment, the advice on moving amphibians or frog spawn from pond to pond is not advised because of amphibian diseases. And I'm not sure if amphibian diseases spread via the water, but I think at this stage where we are in the world, it's not a good idea to get a jam jar of water and put it in a new pond. I would wait for your new pond to settle itself, really. You'll get amazing things turning up in there within hours. The flies will come and lay their eggs in within hours, because it's you know, there are certain species that have evolved to find new patches of water and colonize them, and they will, and it's wonderful to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was going to ask you about amphibians. I was wondering, you know, how do you introduce them to your pond? I mean, I remember when I tried to make my pond and it became a marsh, that was a no-no. But then I did have a water butt, and I thought, oh, I'll throw the tadpoles in there. But I don't know if they survived, because it was a really, for them, it's like it must be like swimming in an ocean. You know, there was nowhere to sort of hang out, so to speak. So I didn't know how they survived.
Yeah, they well, frogs spawn in the most shallow watering ponds, because it warms up quicker in spring, and it's sort of safer there as well. It's where like you can find algae and bits and pieces, and it's harder for the predators to get to them as well when they're in the really shallow bits. So yeah, they probably didn't fare very well in the water, but David. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a real shame that we're not advised to move frog spawn anymore, because when I was a kid, like, frog spawn was so exciting. And you know, I remember my piano teacher giving me, you know, a big jar of frog spawn to take home and look after. And yeah, it's not recommended that we do that anymore. And I, you know, the reasons are because it could spread disease, but I do, you know, I think we're missing out on some of the fun there. But I also think we should respect the situation we're in, and try and do our best to make sure we don't continue spreading diseases, really.
Yeah. HK was asking, how big is your pond?
It's about, it's not that big, 2.5 meters at its longest and 1.5 meters at its widest. It looks bigger in winter than it does in summer, because it sort of rises and falls. It looks absolutely tiny at the moment. I'll see if I can draw a picture with my. It's about this big at the moment, because we've had no rain for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I keep thinking, should I top that up? But I don't really want to top it up. I want the rains to come. But the tadpoles are swimming in an ever decreasing pool of water, which, yeah, it's starting to give me a bit of anxiety.
Yeah, I'm sure. And Teresa Oakley was asking a question, which actually was going to lead into what I was going to ask next, actually. She's asking, is it okay to locate a pond in full sun? And she's thinking of pond weed problems.
It is okay. I've got, on my allotment, I've got a pond in full sun, and it's brilliant. The frogs absolutely adore it, because it's so warm in spring. It gets loads and loads and loads of wildlife, but I have to top it up quite often, because it just doesn't get any shade all day. So, I mean, the ideal position for a pond is pretty much where I've got this one in my garden. It gets half the pond gets morning sun, the other half gets afternoon sun. It's never fully in the sun, it's never fully in the shade. So there's a bit for everything really, and it's just got a nice balance. Too shady and you risk not getting much wildlife. Too sunny and it's just, a bit of a pain, really. Yeah, I've just rigged up I've just rigged up a drainage system from my greenhouse on the allotment that just goes straight into the pond, so that whenever it rains, it just automatically tops up. So yeah, think twice about fully sunny ponds, because they can be difficult to manage unless you live somewhere like the northwest where you get lots of rain. Obviously, I'm just thinking with my very dry Brighton hat on. But if you live somewhere that's wet, then it's less of an issue for you, I think, maybe.
Okay. One thing I noticed when I tried my hand at creating my own pond was the absolute abundance of mozzies, the larvae. How do you prevent that?
Well, do you know what? Mosquitoes lay eggs in my pond every year, and I'm never bitten. And I think that's because I've got so much other wildlife in the pond that it doesn't get a chance, that very few of the larvae actually get a chance to turn into the adults. I've got back swimmers in there, which also known as water boatmen, like great diving beetles, all these really predatory things. At least 2 types of dragonfly larvae, several species of damselfly larvae. They just don't get a look in. So I think, and as a general rule, the larger the pond you have, the more wildlife you get. So very small ponds, you'll still get mosquitoes breeding in, but you won't necessarily get the predators breeding in either. So yeah, I think the issue with mosquitoes is sort of perhaps more prevalent in smaller ponds than bigger ponds. But this, I mean, yeah, I'm out all the time and I never get bitten, and mosquitoes actually love me. So
Yeah, I was going to say they will see you as a massive mother figure.
maybe. Yeah, mosquitoes normally love me, because I'm vegetarian, so apparently that makes you more prone to being bitten by mosquitoes. So yeah, but conversely, and against what you would think, I've been bitten a lot less since I've had my pond.
What about fish? Is it a good thing to chuck a couple of goldfish in there? Because I notice obviously people have their ponds and are tempted to, or can't resist the temptation to put in fish. So, what's your feeling on fish?
Unfortunately, fish are a big no-no for wildlife ponds because they eat everything. So you dig this lovely pond, and all of these lovely things come and lay eggs, and they sort of live around in the shallows, and they zip about, and you get all the whirligig beetles and the other things that sort of zoom around, and then the fish just eat everything. They eat the tadpoles, they eat the other invertebrates, they eat other larvae, they eat everything. And because they eat a lot and they also poop a lot, fish ponds tend to need water fountains or some sort of source of a pump to sort of keep the water clean. So they're quite sort of, they take some maintenance, you need to sort of run them. So yes, for a wildlife pond, it's best not to introduce fish. However, there is one exception, which is toads, which tend to, or seem to prefer to lay eggs in fish ponds, because the fish will eat all of their competition, because toads are slightly poisonous. Toads and their tadpoles are slightly poisonous. So fish will avoid eating them. So toads can sort of happily swim around and lay their spawn, knowing that fish would eat anything other than their own tadpoles, which is quite cool, I think.
And do you ever get water birds like, for example, a heron ever gracing your pond, or are they more attracted to ponds with fish?
I think they're attracted more to ponds with fish, but they do eat frogs, and I have a lot of frogs. I think I don't know if I'd ever get a heron here. I mean, I live very close to the sea. I don't know. You do get the odd thing coming in, but herons are sort of mainly sort of river birds, aren't they? We haven't really got many of those things nearby. When I was living in London, people next door had a pond, and I once saw a kingfisher in winter because the canals had frozen, and I watched a kingfisher fishing in a garden pond in Clapton, which was amazing to see. I don't know if I'd get one here. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm quite happy with my willow warbler, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
good bird.
it's quite industrial around here, so Yeah.
It's a good bird. So the other question is, okay, you got all these frogs, or should I say tadpoles, who will become froglets and eventually frogs, and obviously there's going to be some depletion in number because of predation. But where do these frogs go?
They disperse and they go and hang out in other gardens. I don't know how far they go. I don't know how many stay. But you know, occasionally I do find frogs in the garden, and they're very welcome. They're very happy. I guess they stay out. If they weren't happy, they wouldn't stay, would they? I know that when in February when they spawned, and it was actually the first time they spawned this year because the pond's only 2 years old. And I knew they'd spawn because in October there was a male croaking in the garden, and I think males croaking in autumn is a sort of party invitation for everyone to sort of gather around in spring. It's like, be here in February. And so I knew they were going to spawn. But come February, I had neighbours texting me saying, I found this frog, it's really fat, I don't know what it's doing. And I was like, I think it's on its way to mine. And I found a dead frog in the road, sort of up the way. I was like, I bet you're on the way to mine. Because I was expecting maybe like 4 or 5 clumps. And I stopped counting at about 30 clumps. I had so much frog spawn. It's like tadpole soup at the moment. It's just thick black with tadpoles. So yeah, I think they came far and wide to spawn in my pond, and I think that means they're going to go far and wide back again to wherever they came from.
Yeah, well, that's good news. You know what? I might actually open the floor slightly now. Della Angel, or is it Della Angel? You've asked an interesting question. Would you want to sort of pop up and ask it in person, I wonder?
Hi, yeah,
Hello, is
Stella
it Del?
Angel.
Oh, Della Angel. Okay, well, I'm in Spain, and whenever I see that word, it's Angel. Della
Yeah, I can
Angel.
be Angel.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Yes, lovely to have this opportunity. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Della, hi.
So yeah, my question was really, so I've got my pond. It's a year and a half old now, and I think I've sort of got a right, a good combination of the liner being covered by the plants and things, but I do seem to lose quite a lot of water to what feels as though sort of like the osmosis factor, so it's sort of seeping into the path, and I just wonder if I've done something wrong with the liner, that I've not finished the edge properly or something.
Have you got the fleece over with the topsoil like I have? No, you haven't.
I missed that stage. When I do my second one, when I move house soon and I get to do my next pond, but no, this one I hadn't realised that was sort of one of the ways to go. So it is just liner, sort of then tucked, sort of raised at the edges a little bit and then tucked into the soil. The plants are growing nicely in it, but it does seem to sort of
leach out, and then you're finding it wet around the edges.
Yes. Yeah,
that's interesting, because the reason I asked about if it was a pond like mine is because that's actually quite common with ponds like mine. It just sort of acts as a wick. The plants and the top subsoil act as a wick, and they just draw the water out, which can be quite a problem in summer. I don't know what would be causing that actually, unless you've got plants sort of growing down.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, on one side the plants are growing down, and that's fine because it's helping them. It's just on the other side, it's sort of, I've got a sort of path that is bark and sort of bark and shingle mix, and it just keeps that damper than perhaps would be ideal, and it just means that I sometimes have to top the pond up.
Yeah, I don't know what would be causing that, I'm afraid. Sorry to be
okay, no, that's fine. I think maybe I've just tucked the liner too far into the path, perhaps. So yeah. Okay, well, I should do better next time.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Della.
Thank you.
Now, let me ask another question, Kate, especially for those who watch this in the future, because don't forget, this is going to be on YouTube, so future generations will be looking at this and thinking, oh, that's interesting. How actually do you make a pond? What do you actually need to do?
Well, for one like mine, you the whole process, I'll take you through the process. you work out where you want it to go. So you avoid beneath trees. You make sure, well, ideally it has a bit of sun, a bit of shade. You mark out the space. You can use like a hose pipe or some string to sort of mark out the shape you want it to be. And then you start digging. And a lot of people say sort of start digging in the middle and work your way out. I don't think it really matters as long as you get your levels right. So the main consideration when you're digging a pond is that you've got shallow, gradual, what's the word, edges, so that you just imagine if you're a hedgehog, you can walk in and out of that pond without getting into trouble, because hedgehogs do swim in summer. They sort of go for a little dip, but they get tired very easily, and they find it difficult to climb out of steep-sided ponds. So if you think about a fish pond, a sort of preformed fish pond, they tend to have quite straight sides, which just means you've just got very deep water all the way around. And if for any reason in summer, for example, the water level drops, then it's quite hard for animals to climb out. So just having these really gradual sloping sides is really important. So however deep you go, you've got to make sure you've got these gradual sloping sides. You can create ledges if you want, or you can just do a really smooth sides. It depends on whether you want to plant directly into any subsoil that you sort of plant around the edge of the pond, or if you just have liner with shelves. And planting baskets, sort of both work well. So yeah, so work out sort of how you're going to finish it and what it's going to look like, and that will determine whether you make shelves or if you just do a nice sloping side. I think it's really important to have shallows, and if you're only going to have a small pond, then make it shallow, because that's where all the life is. That's where you get the tadpoles, it's where you'll get all the other invertebrates, sort of larvae, sort of buzzing around. But if you can afford to have one sort of the size of mine, then going down to about where are we? Between about 40 and 60 centimetres, or nearly down to a metre, is quite useful, because the water temperature remains more stable in summer. So it retains this coolness in summer, but then stays remains as water in winter. It doesn't freeze over when you get to sort of certain depth, and it just regulates the temperature. It means it's less likely to completely dry out. There's always going to be a bit that remains in the pond, remains water, and then you do your planting. So again, depending on how you plant, what you decide, you know, you need an but regardless of how you do it, you need a mix of plant marginals, floating plants, deep water plants, oxygenators. There's quite a lot of crossover with those, so don't get too bogged down with the terminology, but make sure there's plants that you can plant into planting baskets. That there's some free floating plants that you just chuck in, and then they root themselves in. And then there's plants with stems sticking out of the pond as well. So here I've got purple loosestrife, and I've got some marsh marigold somewhere as well. There's just a little bit of it there, which is bigger now. And dragonflies and damselflies use those emergent stems to come out in summer and do their final metamorphosis into an adult fly. So yeah, planting is one of the best things. And then, you know, in terms of dressing the pond, beach areas are really good. So dressing it with stones. I've got 2 beach areas, so I've got a nice clear view of birds bathing, which I love to watch birds bathing in the pond. Little logs and things like this are really useful as well, because they create little nooks and crannies for invertebrates to hide, but also that wood, you know, very slowly rots into the water and provides additional habitat. So I think there's one moth that breeds in rotten logs, so you're creating habitat for that one moth. And then obviously a dragonfly perch is, you know, the ultimate pond accessory, because you'll get dragonflies perching on it, which is just the coolest thing ever.
What's great about ponds is that it all adds to that amazing biodiversity that we all need to be sort of encouraging if we have a garden, because it's not only just about having a wild area, but as you say, it's the ultimate to have a pond, because you have a mixture of the vegetation that attracts invertebrates and other animals, and then you got the actual water that attracts, animals that inhabit that, and plus the two meet, because you got birds and other animals that bathe and others that emerge from the water. And
Yeah.
speaking of emerging from water, Sue Turner has asked a question. Sue, are you around to grace us with your presence?
Hi, yes, I am.
Hello, Sue.
Sue.
How are you?
Hi, fine, thank you. Yeah, we know we've got at least one newt in the pond, and I found one. I had black rubber gloves on, and I was scooping up some of the sludge from the bottom, and it was like the creature from the Black Lagoon. What I wanted to know is, do they tadpoles and frog spawn?
Yes, I do. They do.
Yeah.
In fact, on my allotment pond, they just make such a meal of my frog spawn that yeah, if you've got a real issue with it, I mean, it sounds like you've only got a small population of newts.
I don't know. I've only ever found one.
You've only ever found one. I mean, do you get frog spawn? Do you get frog spawn coming in?
Yeah, we had about 12 lots of frog spawn and a lot of tadpoles now.
Okay.
But it seemed to have sunk into the mud at the bottom.
Okay. Well, I mean, that happens, and that's okay. As long as you've got lots of tadpoles, that's really good. I know that some people who have a lot of newts, they get very upset about the newts eating the frog spawn. I mean, what normally happens in the natural world is that you get booms and busts. So the newts eat the frog spawn to the point where there's no more frogs to breed in the pond. So then the newts clear off, and then the frogs sort of start again. And then it takes a while for the newts to sort of come back and eat the frog spawn. But if if you're ever worried, and I know some people who do get worried, and I do this myself on my allotment, is if you've got like an old fish tank or a little butler sink or something where you can create a mini container pond, you can just take one clump out and just raise it separately from the newts.
Right. Because we don't get any little frogs. We never see froglets.
Oh, don't you?
I wonder whether never.
Well, maybe do that then. Maybe next year, just take one clump out and then raise it separately, quite close to the pond. And then as soon as what I do is when the tadpoles get big, so before they get legs, then I chuck them back in the pond. Because I think,
Would they not eat them then when they're bigger?
No, I don't think so. I think they're gonna. I think they mainly eat the eggs, and then sort of small tadpoles. So yeah, when they get big and beefy, I think they're all right.
Yeah, can I thank you, because last year you identified an ashy mining bee on my front lawn. We'd never seen them before about this time of year, and they've come back again this year, so thank you for that.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad it's come back. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. Actually, let's see now. We've got another question there because Sue's now strolled off. Sophie, have you... would you like to grace us with your presence and ask you a question about native plants?
Hi.
Hi, Sophie. How are you?
Good, thank you. Mum and Dad are listening in as well. So.
Hiya.
This is not the original question I asked, but any advice to give them about having a small container pond, because I'm trying to encourage them, and Mum's quite keen to have one. So that would be great. But and also along that line, for a container pond or a small pond, because I just want to make sure that I've got the right thing. There are kind of top native plants to around the edge and in the pond. Loosestrife, which I've already got down to get, but and I've got things like marsh marigold, and I can't remember the floating weed. I'm not very good on names, but anything else particularly that you think is like a must-have for either in or around the edge of the pond?
Okay, shall I start with the container pond and why your parents should definitely have one?
Yes.
Okay. Well, because they're really fun. I've got I'd say my front garden pond is a little butler sink or a Belfast sink. It's this big, and I've got a little pot of brookline, which is a really good marginal plant in one corner, and I've got water forget-me-not in another corner, which is another marginal. I put tadpoles in. I put one clump of frog spawn in there, so sort of an insurance against anything that might eat them in the big pond. So I've got tadpoles in there, and other things come in. So I get dragonflies using it. I get the occasional water beetle. I get lizard flies and little tiny things coming in. And I really like, because my garden's sort of west facing, so it doesn't get sun until sort of late morning, is I eat my breakfast in the front garden with my container ponds, and I just sort of sit and look at it, and it's just really nice, and it just reflects the water up onto my living room ceiling, and it's brilliant, and it's lovely, and it also provides a water habitat for foxes and hedgehogs. So I've got, because it's a container, obviously you need to think about how access. So I've got little bricks on either side to make a frog ladder, and a plant pot as well. So I've seen foxes drinking from it. I've seen birds bathing in it, sparrows bathing in it. I'm pretty sure I found a hedgehog poo on the wall next to it. So I'm pretty sure the hedgehog climbed the wall and then got his head in and had a drink. So, you know, it serves the community, especially, you know, my local park doesn't have a pond. So, you know, the fact that I've got one in my front garden and my back garden means that, you know, thirsty animals can use it. So I hope that's enough to persuade your parents.
I think. It's a very natural garden. It's lovely. Well, they are my inspiration. So.
Oh, is they're the ones with the crocuses in the front garden?
Right.
Oh, so I've seen their garden, and it looks beautiful.
It is beautiful.
So in terms of pom plants, native, I always use native pom plants because they are safer, I think, in ponds. There's so many ponds, so many pom plants over the years that have been used, which are invasive, which can, you know, as we all know now, I hope, can get into natural waterways if they escape the pond, or if they grow too quickly. And then you hoof them out and you put them on your compost heap, and then all it takes is, I mean, at the moment I've had seagulls just going around my garden picking up every last thing to make their nests. And what if a seagull took some invasive pom plant and made a nest on a roof, and then there was a wind and it blew it into a river? I mean, it's, you know, you can just imagine the scenarios where they end up in natural waterways. And there's about 5 really bad ones that have been completely banned, which can block waterways, and they starve other plants of oxygen and nutrients, and they can kill fish and all sorts of really awful things. And then there's lots of others that are sort of you know, they're sort of ones to watch, but they're still available to buy. So I always go with native because they're safest, and if they escape into the wild, then they escape into their own wild, if you know what I mean. So in terms of the best ones, sorry, I really like brooklime, I really like water forget-me-not, they're both marginal plants. I really like arrowhead, which is lovely. It's got lovely sort of waxy arrow shaped leaves. I love water soldiers, which have got a reputation for just growing really out of control, but I just don't think they are really. Well, they haven't been in my pond anyway, but you can just hoik them out and compost them. Hornwort is a good oxygenator. Spiked water milfoil is really nice as well. It sort of creates a mat of leaves just beneath the surface. So there's a few there.
Right. Well, I persuaded my sister, it was more her husband. They built, well, did a pond, a wildlife pond, and they've got hedgehogs. There's a little path where the hedgehogs come in, and tortoises, and yeah, loads and loads of wildlife. So they spend loads of time there. So
Brilliant!
Every garden should have a pond.
They should. They should definitely. Oh.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sophie, for your questions.
Thanks, Sophie.
Let's quickly talk about your book, because we're coming up to the end of our little session.
Okay.
So, what is your book? You know, what is it about? Obviously, it's about creating wildlife ponds, but what can people find within the pages of that book?
Well, there are 4 designs on how to make a pond. So there's lots of different options for different types of garden. So there's 2 container pond options. There's a slightly more formal option, which is sort of edged with paving slabs, and then options to sort of make it more or less formal. And there's, you know, your full-blown wildlife pond, which is, you know, got your mud like my one, you know, your muddy margins. So there's 4 options with sort of step-by-step how-tos on how to make them. There's also loads of stuff. What I really wanted to do with the book was not just tell people how to make a pond, but explain why they are so brilliant. So there's lots of me going on about ponds and how great they are, really, which I'm not going to apologise for. There's your pond through the seasons. So sort of what you can expect from your pond, what I get from my pond through the seasons. So, you know, what it's like in winter. You know, it's very quiet in winter and it freezes over, but you know, when the light hits the water on a sort of sunny winter's day, it's beautiful. And you know, you spend more time looking at birds, I think, in winter than you do in summer, because there's so much else going on in summer. In summer it's just like a riot, it's just so noisy. There's birds, there's dragonflies, there's all sorts going on. It's you just look in the water and it's just so much going on. Pond dipping, it's like instructions on how to pond dip, the role your pond plays in a garden, and just why ponds are the best thing ever, really. It's a complete book about ponds.
Did it take you long to write, by the way? Is this something that you found, you know, you came quickly, or is this something that, what's your process like?
I'm a very quick writer. And I'm also very good at meeting deadlines. So I was commissioned to write this book.
I wish I was like you.
I can't write unless I get a deadline. So sometimes people ask me to write things and I say, can I have a deadline? Yeah, I'm really good at meeting deadlines, astonishingly so, really. And I wrote it during lockdown, so I didn't actually have much else to do. So 6 months, I think, from start to finish, which, yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah. And it was just a perfect opportunity because I wasn't allowed to leave the house. I just spent loads of time just connecting with my pond anyway, which I was going to do. And I'd take breaks between writing and just go and sit by my pond and just absorb how it made me feel. And then I go upstairs and write about that. So yeah, it was a really lovely process, actually.
Did gardening and watching your pond help you through the whole of the kind of lockdown situation?
Oh, completely. I would have gone completely mad had I not had my garden, because it gave me an avenue to get outside and to do stuff. And I think as well, there's an element of control with gardening that not many gardeners will admit to, really. But I think being able to make decisions and control spaces and you know, be the architect of your own land can help sometimes with, you know, just general things that we all face. And for me, gardening has always been so important, and I've always not coped very well when I've not had access to the garden, to a garden, any garden. So yeah, I'm extremely lucky that I had that. And being able to sit by the pond and being able to put my spade into the soil and just breathe was extremely beneficial.
You may not be able to answer my next question, but what kind of advice can you give people that haven't got gardens?
Well, as long as we're not in lockdown, I think get out to your local park as much as you can, take regular walks, try and absorb yourself in the natural world as much as possible. You know, I know that, you know, I've lived in flats before where I've not had gardens, and yeah, I mean, I was out more. I was trying, you know, going to the park more, and you know, if you're interested in gardening, then put your name on a waiting list for an allotment if you can. Although sometimes, you know, they are very long these days. But I just think getting out and just, you know, if you do the same walk every day, you can you learn to spot things. You learn to spot when the leaves come on trees, when the blossom comes, which birds are using which trees. You know, when the grass grows and things like that, just help root you to a space and root you to the season. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. If you could be anywhere on the planet, notwithstanding the current pandemic, where would you be right now?
I'd be in Costa Rica.
So you haven't changed your mind since last time?
Did I say Costa Rica last
I
time?
think you did, yeah.
Oh my goodness me. It is the best place in the world. So yeah, I would be there, I'm afraid.
Well, that's good to know. Okay, well, let me just quickly run through for all the Zoomers who's coming up next on In Conservation With, because we've been quite busy getting a few people lined up for the coming weeks. Obviously, we've just been with Kate on Thursday the 27th. We've got Scott Widensall. Scott Widensall is talking about migration, bird migration. He's written a really interesting book on bird migration. He's based in Maine in western, or should I say eastern US, and he'll be talking about that. On Thursday the 29th of April, we've got Sarah Gibson, who's written a book called Swifts and Us, and she'll be talking about, believe it or not, swifts. On May the 7th, Monday the 10th of May, even at 7 p.m. We've got Catherine Norbury, and she's written a book compiling a lot of what women have been talking about nature across the centuries. Do you know about this book, and do you know about her?
I contributed to it, yes. I'm in there.
Excellent. You're in there. So come along to that. That's on Monday the 10th of May. On the 27th of May, we got a guy called James Lowen, who lives in Norfolk, and he's talking about moths. And his new book's called Much Ado About Mothing. So if you want to learn about moths, come along on Thursday, the 27th of May. And quite interestingly, on Monday, the 31st of May, we've got this guy called Les Stroud, who might be familiar to the North Americans amongst us tonight, but I've never heard of him, to be honest, until his agent contacted me after Margaret Atwood was here. He's a Canadian, and it's a bit of a Bear Grylls type character, but he's more he knows a lot about nature, and he'll talk to us about surviving in nature, how to survive when you're out there on your own with nothing else but whatever's around you. So it could be will be an interesting chat on the 31st of May, Monday, the 31st of May, with Les Stroud. So that's what's coming up on In Conservation With. I just want to say a big thank you to Kate for coming along today and talking about garden ponds. We're going to have a Q&A in a minute.
Thank you.
But Zoomers, once again, I'd like to thank you guys for coming unstintingly every week or every time we have an In Conservation With. It's been a year now. I feel so delighted. So thank you very much. So until we meet again, don't forget to keep looking up.